just give you an overview, all of you. I feel like I should just sit down and talk now. But I mean, I'm just going to talk about the Yonsei program and the things that I've done as a part of it, and things that make going there so much fun. And I'm sure Kim Young can actually back up how awesome Yonsei is. She's an actual graduate of their program. So just to kind of talk a little bit about first getting over there. I just thought it would be cute to kind of show, it's not a short flight. But I was going to say, when we, both times, flew from here, once was to LA, once was to San Francisco, and that's actually arriving at the Incheon airport, which is actually not in Seoul. What, about 30 minutes outside of Seoul?
Yeah, 32 an hour.
Yeah, depending on traffic. So, but it's actually a wonderfully set up airport. It really is. I mean, it has great, like, trying to find things. They have a really nice laid out map, plenty of places to eat, lots of little kind of areas where you can ask questions. And I mean, again, just kind of a nice, I want to say, a nice trip over. Although I will say, if you do go, try not to fly United. fly one of the Asian airlines, because their services are so much nicer. So on Asiana, I had the TV in front of me on the seat. On United, it was just one common one. No one good. So, okay, this is actually Yonsei University. There's a map and actually a picture of it. One of the neat things about Yonsei, though I suppose that depends on how much walking you like to do, is that it actually goes up into a hill. And one of the other things is that actually when you're on parts of the campus, it's easy to forget you're in the middle of a city. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. Is this better? Yeah.
We ought to be able to. Okay. So, but, because on the campus there, the campus is gorgeous. Actually, I can't talk enough about the campus because it is absolutely, I want to say it is kind of stunningly gorgeous, and there's, sorry, it's okay. Hi. There's lovely parks in there, there's trees, there's hiking trails, and then there's also, amazing technology in places like the Samsung Library. Have you noticed its first name there? Yeah, and right now, actually, you can kind of barely see it here, but this was a road that was going in. Yonsei, right now, all in here is a big construction zone. So, but they're putting parking underneath, and it's gonna again be a walkway and very beautiful. And the next time we do the Yonsei trip, they should actually be done by then, I think. I think that's the plan. But regardless, actually, it's amazing if you're not in the front part, you don't notice the construction either. And the students actually, where the students stay is a dorm that's, this is the Milwaukee dorms, this is where the students stay. Which means that if you do that, you get really good at walking. Yeah.
Looks sad.
Yeah. So, but that's actually not to worry, because again, every time that I've gone, we haven't spent a lot of time in the dorms. So, this was actually visiting the Samsung Library. We did this both times, but I only took pictures the first time. But this is really kind of neat, because what you see behind the students here, these are actually interactive digital boards, like interactive digital bulletin boards. You can post notes there for people to find. You can put notices about lost and found things. One of the other things that's really neat is at the library, you actually reserve seats in the library. Like literally every seat you can reserve for study spaces, for, I know that might seem, I want to say anal or annoying, but it's actually really kind of neat, because then you always know you're going to have that space. And you can reserve it, I think it's up to 3 hours. And then 2 or 3 hours, and then if nobody's there, you can actually then re-reserve it to stay at the spot. But you can also, they have study rooms, they have this amazing AV area where they actually have a film studio where they can do the weather. They have a place to watch movies. They also have a place where you can go in and listen and practice languages. They have a place for editing video, or probably not video anymore, but anyways, editing what's been filmed. And what you see in the second picture, that's actually me standing on the top of it. There's a coffee shop on the top. And that's actually looking out over, I'm trying to think the angle on there. I think I'm looking out over the campus on that side of it. But it's actually absolutely gorgeous on top of there. And you can kind of, like I said, inside it's air conditioned, which is nice. Outside it's not, but it's still quite beautiful that's on top of it. I was gonna say, there's also the museum and archive, and this is so neat, so amazingly neat. Actually, the first time we went, all we saw was the archive which is kind of in the basement area, and that's the curator there. And what he's holding is actually a shoe that somebody had once worn, and the other one are actually swords that have been unearthed, and that they have to be very careful with because they're going to crumble if they're not very careful with how they're preserved. And this area is heavily, heavily temperature controlled and actually highly protected. I mean, literally to go into each one, they have to enter the codes, and sometimes you enter the code to go in one door, and then you have to enter the code to go into another door. And so these things are really, well protected. But when we went this time, the museum is really being filled out nicely. So there's a lot more displays, and there's a lot more that's been done with it. It's actually really, I want to say, really kind of amazing. I mean, it's just, I will tell you that we all really got over this every time. Just the kind of stuff that they had down there. But this is one of the things that's kind of neat. This building there, that's the original archive at Yonsei. And they've actually kept, and it's actually behind the building where the museum is. And you can go in there and they actually have information, but these are also statues that were brought in from, I want to say, surrounding areas. I mean, there's like a lot of statuary in that area as well. You can kind of just walk around there and see the stuff. And it's just this actually amazingly beautiful little piece of history that's actually connected right to the museum and the archive. You don't necessarily always see that, especially not here in the United States. You don't necessarily have that connection to the same way. So it was really kind of neat to see all of those things. And just, again, see this really interesting range of stuff throughout the histories of Korea. I mean, you get a sense of exactly how far back a lot of the history goes and the kinds of things that they have. And they have a lot of eagles. I was gonna say, and why do they have a lot of eagles?
Is the mascot, it's the school's animal.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of neat. But yeah, I think you saw like 4 or 5 stuffed eagles down there. And then there's also a lot of pictures of, paint. And then there's also, I'm trying to think, there are paintings that are up in one of the rooms that's about 4 important plants and flowers. I can't remember what they are now, of course, but yeah. Chrysanthemum is one of them. I do know that, but the rest of them I don't. But again, it was really kind of neat I will say it was not just neat to see it, but it was neat to actually have somebody walk through what was important about it. Or kind of point out a lot of these neat, these kind of different things that were all part of all of this. And then one of the other things that's awesome about the Yonsei program is you're not just taking a class with Simmons, you're taking it with students that are part of Yonsei. And this is actually the last day of both times that I went. On the left is from 2012, and on the right was the most recent one. And she's here right now. Yonsei, she actually is here for a year. And then I'm gonna say, she actually came the year after as well. So we've actually had several students come from Yonsei to be part of the programs here. But one of the things I think is really neat about this, and by the way, feel free to interrupt me with questions at any time, or let me know if I'm boring you and I can tell you much more exciting stories. But is that, like the first time I taught management and ethics, and the second time I just taught ethics, but in both cases, learning about things like information ethics in another culture really gives you a different view on some of it. How privacy is seen differently depending on cultural norms, and the understanding of copyright, or for that matter, the understanding of access and actually technology. Because let me tell you, Korea has, they're like #1 or #2 with the actual inroads about having access to being able to actually use the internet and things like that are online. So, I mean, those kinds of things are really impressive, but it was, you know, I actually think this is the same room in both of them, I think. But, it's a chance not just to learn about the topic, but to learn about the topic within another culture, and maybe one that you're not very familiar with. So that was, I will tell you, in both cases, I learned as much as I talked about. I mean, I really learned a lot from the students there, as much as anything they might have learned from me. But we didn't just spend time in the classroom, although obviously that would be a big part of going on one of the, you know, foreign travels, is that you're gonna be learning something, but it's not just learning about the material, it's also learning about where you are. And the things that are related to a lot of the cultural things there, which I thought was important to spend time at. You know, I always made a point of scheduling tours, and this time we actually did some that were off the campus, and one of them is actually the National Library of Seoul, which is really awesome. I'm gonna say that a lot about almost everything, but the picture you see there, that's actually the full thing, and then this, what you see in the right picture, that's actually a place where anybody can come off the street and look things up. You don't have to have a library card, you don't have to have anything like that to be able to use those terminals. Now, to actually access materials, you would have to get a library card to go in, but you just need to check the news. They also have, you can't see there, they have big electronic panels where you can read some of the latest newspapers. You know, so I mean, this is, to me, this is one of the best commitments I've ever seen to serving your community, because it's not just about people who are active users, but it's providing resources for anybody who might need it. And they do have people who can help you, like, a little bit beyond that, so there's actually a lot of great things in there. And I mean, the library itself was impressive. They had a whole digital area, they had, you know, amazing collections. They had a book washer. It was really, actually even the Korean students were really impressed by it, but it's, you know, one of those things that during times when people are sick, you always worry about too much. You can literally put it in and it actually will help sanitize the books. And they also had, this was one of my favorite parts, they actually had used a phone booth box that people could go into if they had cell phone calls they needed to make, so they weren't disturbing anybody. To me, that was one of the most inventive things I've ever seen. Like, so people could actually communicate, you know, take cell phone calls if they needed to. So, you know, and again, we only saw a little bit of this because there's also an archive there and a lot of other things, but it was, you know, had a lot of really interesting things in it. But we didn't just go to the National Library, we also went to the Korean Film Archive. And what you see behind us here, well, anybody here seen the movie Snowpiercer or heard of it? Recognize the costumes?
Yeah.
I didn't know until we went there it was filmed in Korea. This is, you know, obviously set pieces from it, but this film archive it has so much in it. It has in these, okay, let me cancel that, sorry. There we go. It, I was gonna say, you know, they had this display. It has places where it holds, where we'll actually hold films. They'll show films that people can go to. They had a museum that had like the whole history of Korean cinema. And to me, it was fascinating to look at that because, you know, we kind of think about film, how it developed here in the Western world. And especially with a country like Korea that has the kind of history that it does, I didn't realize, you know, the things that influenced it. Like you had the original, when they started, and then when you had the Japanese occupation that changed what they could do. And then after World War II, you kind of had this other creation. And then, but actually, much to my surprise, is that there was a period of time in the 60s where the Korean government censored as much as the Japanese occupational government did. And it wasn't until they started actually losing a lot of, I want to say, the customer base to American films out of Hollywood that they started changing anything. And now you're starting to see more collaboration and things like that. But what their goal is to have everything from about the start of the Korean, film industry on. One of the things is that the modern ones, there's actually now, every time you have something that's done in Korea, they get a copy of it automatically. That obviously wasn't already done, and they're doing everything they can to try to find films of the past. And, as you go further, it has here, less than 40% of the films that were created in Korea prior to 1970 are actually available in the archive. And it's not because they haven't been trying to find them, they just can't find, they're either what they have, the films have gone bad because of the night trade or other things. That was interesting, because they also brought them up to where they're stored. And so we got to see a lot of the different, as you can start seeing them deteriorate, and they have the different things that are contained. And they also have this amazing, where they're showing us, restoring film. And they're actually now seen as, a lot of countries go to this archive to learn about restoring films digitally. They have one of the best known processes in the world, actually. They've also expanded their archive, that they now have an off-site archive to store things. And again, they have this program, Cinema on Wheels, in which they'll actually bring a portable screen to more rural areas to show films, so that it's not just limited to the cities where things are actually easily available. They have this amazing reference library where they have all this stuff about movies, and they have soundtracks, and they have all sorts of research that you can do there. And a lot of they have a lot of things in English as well as in Korean, and actually other languages as well. But honestly, there was so much here, and it's just amazing that we only got a little sliver of what we saw, but what we saw was just, absolutely blew me away. It was really interesting. And the museum is open to anybody. That's it, you can go in and look at it at any time. Obviously, a lot of the other areas we got to go to were part of the tour, but it was still, again, I learned a lot about one part of preserving culture, and what are some of the things that can have a huge impact on it. Because obviously one of the other issues that they had was the Korean War. A lot of things were destroyed when Seoul was initially invaded by the North Koreans, and a lot of cultural materials were destroyed at that time. So they're trying to find things based on, maybe somebody has a copy someplace, things like that. So again, it was really interesting to kind of get a view of that, because that's not the problem we have with film in the U.S. Our biggest problem is preserving it before the film deteriorates, not necessarily simply finding it. And then there was the Korean War Museum. Let me ask you, did you guys get a lot about the Korean War in high school history? No, I didn't even get much of it in college history. And let me tell you, if you ever want to be in absolute awe and humbled, go to this museum. It was, again, open, free to the public. And this is just one of the statues that are outside. The thing that's interesting is the one that's on the other side. And this is the first, I've never seen this portrayed so well, but this one is all soldiers. On the other side, it's all about the civilians. But again, Isol, I pointed her out in the picture already.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I showed the picture of our last day of class.
Oh.
But there's just as much about the role of the impact on civilians as there is about the soldiers who fought in the war. And it's, again, I can tell you one thing, I want to learn more about the Korean War, because I didn't know a fraction of this that's in there, and there's so much. And one of the things that was neat about this is that they showed the history of wars in Korea across its history, but then you had the big focus on, 1951, something like that. Something like that, yeah. So, but there is, and one of the other things that they had up there is that they have an entire floor that's about the countries who assisted. And by the way, not just by sending soldiers, they had, really kind of played homage to anybody who assisted with supplies, with, like the Norwegians didn't send soldiers, but they sent doctors. and there are a couple other countries that weren't able to send people, but they sent food. And so, I mean, like, all of that is listed in there. And, something that we know is a part of our history, but you don't learn about in our school. It was amazing to learn about some of the, especially something that was obviously a significant part about the US military. Then there's also just exploring Seoul, which to me is kind of like the main reason to go. I was gonna say, as Lisa, will tell you, as would anybody who's there, I will go back anytime they will have me. I love this city. This Seoul is an absolutely amazing city. And that's the subway map, by the way. So, and it's so easy to find your way around on the subway, because first they list everything in Korean, and then in English, and I guess there's other languages, but I just cared about the English. Yeah, because there's a lot of tourists. You have, there's a lot of people who come through. So I'm just gonna go over some of the neat places that we visited. And 2 of them are palaces, because again, Seoul has amazing palaces. And what's even more amazing about these, they're in the middle of the city. Seriously, and you get into them, and you wouldn't know that you're half a mile from a major street. I mean, like a heavily trafficked street. And they're very much preserved as they were. And they're absolutely gorgeous. But this is, how do you say this one? I'm not gonna say it correctly. Yeah, that. I have to tell you that it took me 2 trips before I learned how to say thank you. Kamsahamnida. I can do that now. That's still the only word I know in Korean. But this is just kind of showing you pieces of it. This is the students who went. That's Abby, Caitlin, and Nikki, and that's in front of one of the many. I want to say the many different halls and buildings that are on the palace grounds. But again, this just kind of shows you. I'm not kidding. We are seriously in the middle of a hugely busy area in Seoul. And you wouldn't know that from what you see right here. I mean, it got to a point where, like, we were walking around, we got to this one area where we realized we couldn't hear anything. I mean, like, you could hear nature, but you couldn't hear the cars. Could you imagine someplace like that in Boston? And by the way, in the United States, Boston is one of the best historically preserved cities. We have more historical sites than, I want to say, almost anywhere else, and you don't have that kind of amazing. Of course, we have 200-something years of history. Korea has 2,000 or something years of history that they can look at. Oh yeah, further. Okay. Not trying to undercut it, just kind of pointing out in comparison, we're not even close. And this is another of the palaces, and this one is actually a UNESCO historical site. And they actually have tours in English in the mornings, which is really kind of neat to do. The other one, you could actually buy guidebooks. They didn't necessarily have the tours, which again, all of that is fine. It was really neat just to kind of wander around and see things. And this is just kind of some of the tours. This is one of the things I love that I learned about all of this. Okay, I don't know if you can tell, but there's actually 3 levels here. This is like the ground level, this is one raised, and then this middle one is the highest one. The only people who could walk on that was the royal family. And then these were people that were either part of the military or part of the civil service, and whichever one you won had a lot to do with which side you walked on. One side was only for military, the other one was only for the high-ranking civil servants. And then everybody else, which would have probably been me, had to walk on the regular ground. But you also see these markers. This was a big building for formal meetings, and you would line up based on your rank and whether or not you were military or civil service. And this actually noted where you would actually line up. So this is an example of where the king would sit in the throne room, and this picture there, that actually traveled with him. It was to be behind him at all times, which was another thing. Again, I like history, so learning this stuff was really interesting to me, but you can also see here, these are actually electric lights, and this was the first building in Korea to have electricity, and they were telling us that when it first started, what would happen is that after the gates were closed and at night when the lights would come on, you'd have people from the surrounding areas who would like come to the walls so they could see the lights at night, which I thought was kind of neat. It was introduced by the English, I think. They brought it, they kept up with it so that they could, try to be more modern, and so they wanted to make sure they had some of the comforts. But one of the other interesting things is, like, if you've ever seen period pieces and you always see the king's bedchamber is really elaborate, it's not actually how it was. The king's bedchamber would literally have a pallet to sleep on, and that was it. Because they didn't want any place for assassins to hide. The queen's bedchamber is a different issue. But the king's bedchambers were not elaborate at all because they wanted to make sure they could keep them safe. So there's this great area called Incidon. It's a very touristy area because I'm willing to bet that if you're not a tourist, you don't spend a lot of time there. So, but these first statues, those are actually guardians. They're supposed to keep bad spirits from coming into a town, and they guard the entrance. And this is actually in front of a Buddhist temple that's nearby. And they're trying to remember, there was something that was coming up. They had this absolutely beautiful display of these fish, and you actually got to the point where they would pass through, like they were passing to the next life, and they went from being colored to being white. It was absolutely, I keep saying awesome and wonderful, and I don't have other words. It was, but I mean, it was actually, again, kind of incredibly beautiful. This is actually inside of the temple itself. I actually very respectfully took it outside of the temple, but the doors were open, that you could see. And then this tree here, that's actually in front of it, that tree is 500 years old. They actually have a plaque telling us about it, but I actually thought that was amazing just to see a tree. I mean, I'm sure we have things like that here, but it was just kind of really neat to kind of see. And again, getting a sense of a lot of the rich cultural history that's available in all of this. And it's not just, the other thing though, when you're talking about culture, you're not just talking about this wonderful history. There's a modern side to it too. They have baseball. And I went to a game both times. First time we saw the LG twins, and then, well, actually no, both times we saw the LG twins, that's right. But also the Doosan Bears, is that right? They also play in the same stadium, so there was a lot of things there. But somebody who's a diehard Red Sox fans could learn about enthusiasm from Korean fans. They have chants for every player, and you sit on the away or home side, and they actually have, I mean, it's, first time the LG Twins won, the second time they didn't, so it wasn't quite as exciting at the end of the game the second time. But it was still, again, one of the most enthusiastic and fun baseball games I've ever been to in my life, and that's saying something because I've been to a lot of baseball games. So, but there's also the food. So, and the first one, I mean, this is actually, I love this about the Korean food. This is, I mean, this is what they bring out when you get the food. You don't have to worry about being hungry, ever, because of the food that's kind of a part of it. But the food is amazing. There's so many options. You don't have to worry about, you know, if you're a vegetarian, although you do have to, the one thing I will say, if you're a vegetarian and you don't eat fish, you need to make sure that's clear, because there seems to be, I guess, vegetarians in Korea normally are people who don't eat meat, but fish isn't considered on this, fish is usually seen as being okay.
So they use a lot of fish, like, in their supposedly vegetarian. I'm not vegetarian, but I don't eat red meat. So.
Nikki, I was gonna say, Nikki is a vegetarian, and so that was something that we had to kind of make clear, no fish.
Oh, yeah.
On a few cases. It didn't bother me whatsoever.
Was there, yeah, I imagine, is it be interesting to see how it would be for people who have to keep, like, other kinds of diets or eating more expensive than vegetarian.
Yeah.
I imagine vegans would have a really hard time.
Yeah, although I will tell you, this is one of the ironies here, okay? I am not a vegetable eater in any way, shape, or form. I eat vegetables like mad when I'm in Korea. I don't know what they do to make them yummy, but somehow they're so much better in Korea than they ever are here. And I was gonna say, and there's kind of full ranges and stuff. Like actually at this meal, it's what we called our Korean tacos because it was, you had, they were, or Korean burritos, but it was basically, you had leaves of lettuce and you filled it with all sorts of different things. And it was a totally vegetarian meal. It was like all vegetables. That I didn't realize until later I ate a meal of nothing but vegetables. This one, this wasn't bibimbap, right? No, but I mean, this was actually, and the best thing is there's a side dish you like, they'll keep bringing it out to you. Because we like the kimchi pancakes. We gotta keep asking, oh God. The kimchi and the scallion pancakes. Oh, so good. What's that?
I've had some Korean food
Yeah.
in the States, but. I mean,
Well, and then there's this
not
amazing,
anywhere.
there's this amazing dessert of shaved ice. Oh my God. Green tea and just, yeah, basically. And you know what, here's the thing, you eat a lot, but as it turns out, you work it off.
By like living in the.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, I just walked, but I walk a lot anyways, but I mean, I walked a lot there too. So I mean, that wasn't ever a problem, but I mean, God, they have coffee shops. Oh my God, you think we lack coffee here in the United States? So, but yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about this. I have yet to have anything there I didn't like. Honestly, I tended to enjoy almost every, and it's kind of worth trying everything. There is a lot of seafood because, you know, you actually, Insadong, where the airport is right on the water. You know, so I mean, you have a lot of seafood there, you have a lot of pork and chicken and beef. You know, so I mean, there is kind of a lot of options. They also have this neat thing, they have dog and cat cafes. Because most people can't actually have pets because of where they live, and so they actually have ways for you to enjoy animals. And you know, you go in, you buy a drink, and you get to spend time petting the animals. This helped me when I was away from my dogs for 2 weeks. And by the way, that dog is as big as it looks. It's not a trick of the photography. And it was also so amazingly sweet. This guy had attitude. Like, you're adoring me. No. You have to look at me. I am so cute. I mean, he just kept doing that. But this guy was just like, oh yeah, here, scratch my ears. I'm good. And when we first sat down, there was this beautiful Afghan dog sitting on one side, and it was not moving. So Shane and I, okay, we'll sit on the same side. Obviously, the dog gets to have its side. So, but I mean, again, there's cat cafes. There's even a bird cafe. So I mean, again, if you can't have pets, there's a way that you can still actually enjoy the animals. And then there's this river, again, how do you say that? Oh, it's okay, it's fine. Which, it's really neat because it goes through all Seoul, and it's a man-made river. And as you can see, you can actually go down and stick your feet in, which I did on more than one occasion. But it's really kind of neat because I don't know if you can kind of see here, you can actually walk up and down, you know, on the banks of it, on the side of it. So it's kind of this really neat area that kind of connects to a lot of Seoul. And this is actually Seoul at twilight. On the side there, it's actually, you know, this one right there was just, the sun was just going down, and I managed to actually catch a good picture for once, but. What's that?
What's the time that the sun generally went down when you were there? Based on like the left.
I'm trying to think.
Was it later or was it around earlier? I mean, when I was in Ireland, I forgot
Oh,
that
no,
it was higher, so like it was going down at like 10:30 at night, or like
they're
like
further
low,
south than
yeah,
us.
so it would be.
Yeah, it
I'd
wasn't.
like to figure out where it was.
Yeah, it wasn't like, it wasn't
Same
lower
with
than here. It was
Russia.
at, it actually got dark at, I wanna say, what seems like normal times for getting dark. It's not as extreme as we have it here. So yeah, no, Korea, I was gonna say Seoul's further south than that, so you're not doing.
So bad at left. Unless I'm looking right at that.
This is actually, near a great shopping area, London, but it's the east gate to the city, or what used to be the east gate to the city. And one of the things that's kind of neat, do you guys see these? These are little gargoyles, and the number of them that you see generally represented the status of the person, they would be on homes too, like at the palaces, the status of the people who live there. The highest number were obviously royalty. But, you know, they, again, acted as protectors. That was one of the you know, part of the architecture. Then there's also this wonderful temple that's in, again, it's south of the river, isn't it, Bogensal?
I've heard about the temple, but I actually never been there.
Okay, no, but I mean, I think it is actually south of the river, because there's a river that kind of cuts, so, and north tends to be, have a lot more historic things, and south is, but, these are just, I was gonna say, what you see here, these lanterns, these are actually, wishes that, or I wanna say messages or wishes that people send to, relatives who have passed on. It's, coming up on a day of the year that, I wanna say, it's not the same, but it's, I think it's a similar sentiment to Day of the Dead in Mexican cultures. And this Buddha is the outside Buddha. It's the Buddha who has yet to come. So he stays outside. They have amazing artwork that's a part of it that has like the histories of Buddha. There's different temples. It was very cute. The first time we went by one of these areas for praying, and the guide was telling us, yes, this is where women come to pray for fertility. And I'm not kidding. 3 of us went like, in unison, not planned. You saw us all like step back from it. But he explained that his mother had wanted a boy, and that she kept going there. He has 4 older sisters, and he actually has a younger brother, but that she went there to pray for a boy, and that she, you know, then he came. Well, one of the other things that on one day of the week they do tours in English, and so both times we did this tour, and part of it is that you don't just get a tour of the temple, you also have a tea ceremony and have a lesson in meditation, and you make lotus flowers. And this is actually from both times us standing with our lotus flowers. That, you know, we made that's a part of it. You kind of choose the colors and do all of it, but it's actually, it's really neat because one, the meditation is actually led by a Buddhist monk who's part of the monastery there. And I was gonna say, the first time he came in for it, the second time, it was actually our guide, was the monk who led us in all of it. So it was really, again, each time, I mean, I've now done some of these tours 2 times, and each time I've learned something new. There's always something else to discover. I learned even better places to shop, thanks to certain people. And then, like I said, other things that we did. We actually went to an event at the American Embassy. The president of ALA was there giving a talk, and so we actually were invited to go, which was really kind of neat. And this is one of the pictures we took, but we also took a picture of a stand-up with Barack Obama. And what was I most happy about finding in that library? The DVD for the 2013 World Series with the Red Sox. I'm like, look, I can find it anywhere. One of the other places we went is, we actually went, there's a series of museums. I want to say it's the Seoul Arts Center, that's not the actual name of it. But one of the museums was actually a calligraphy museum. And kind of cute story was, we went into it and we went, can we go in there? And I don't know if we didn't understand what he was saying to us, or he didn't understand what we were saying to him. But we just kind of went up. Turned out it wasn't open yet. It was opening the next day, so they were still installing stuff. We figured this out after a while. We're like, we should leave now. But again, it was really interesting because it went into a lot of the history of the calligraphy, you know, and the way that the alphabet has been created in Korea. And there was also a museum of design that we went and saw exhibit on Pulitzer Prize winning photographs where it basically spanned the history of the Pulitzer Prize winning. And it was, what was really interesting, because there are pictures I recognize and pictures that are iconic for me as an American, like the Iwo Jima the putting up of the flag. But I know that there are other pictures that were iconic for Koreans, like there's a shot of Koreans going across a bridge into South Korea during the Korean War that I can't remember having ever seen. And there was also a second exhibit about an American photographer who went over at the start of the Korean War and his pictures. They were all focused on that. So I mean, it was really interesting to see something that was, I want to say, to some degree has a Western bent, but to see it within that context. You know, we could have gone and seen Impressionists, but we figured we could probably do that at the Museum of Fine Arts. So, but again, nearby there, we found an amazing place to eat. If nothing else, go for the food. So I mean, like I said, this is just kind of some of the things that we did, and I know that I've spent almost no time on the education there, and all about the things to do around there, but to me that's one of the most important parts about the travel abroad programs is you get to learn so much, and so much of it is outside of the classroom. Regardless as if it's the program with Yonsei, which I tend to prefer simply because you get to study with students from Yonsei. But, you know, going to Italy, learning those things while you're actually in Italy, it can give you, or to Paris, it gives you a different view on some of these perspectives. Like visual information, I can just imagine going around Paris talking about visual information. You know, I mean, and that's without ever getting into a single of the museums. You know, those kind of things. You know, I mean, the same thing here, but there's just, you're not just learning the content of the course. You're learning all sorts of things that are another part of it. So, I've been babbling for 50 minutes. Anybody have questions, comments? Anything want to be added by our Yonsei attendees? Helpful when I had somebody who could help me bargain.
Yeah. Is that a part of the culture? Like,
But I was gonna say, but you know, the fact of the matter is it really isn't that hard. I never really had a huge problem with, I mean, either time I didn't really have a huge problem with things, and you know, you kind of figure out the currency fairly easy, and it's amazing what hand gestures can help you figure out, and so many things are in English there. I mean, there really are, there's a lot of things in English there, so that's kind of, you know, makes life a lot easier as well. And Seoul is a really big tourist area, so they're kind of built for it. You know, so I mean, that it's not really difficult in that sense either. But yeah, no, I mean, I thought Seoul was very accessible. I didn't have any problem figuring out let me tell you, their subway system is so much easier to figure out than Boston, and I grew up in Boston. Yeah, well, and they have, I mean, you can get maps of the subway system easily, actually using the subway, you know, putting money on all that, it's incredibly easy. And in the I love this, in all the subway stations, you can buy clothes, you can buy food, you can buy music in some of them, you can buy beauty products. I mean, a lot of the stations are like, I wanna say they're almost like mini shopping areas. You know, yeah, that's another reason to go, good shopping. Got a lot of fun things there. But I mean, yeah, I was gonna say, first time I went, I was actually a little worried about going to some place that is not only a different language, it's a different alphabet.
Yeah.
You know, a different completely way of writing, and I never had an issue. And I'm saying this is, you know, like the first time Bethany and I went out, this was the first time we found our way to Insadong without really any help outside of the map. You know, and like I said, it was very easy for us to find. They want you to, you know, unlike Boston where we're like, have you ever seen that map? You know, New York City's because we want you to know where you are, Boston because, well, you know, screw you. But,
how do you talk to them? At least they're better maybe.
well, I was gonna say, the thing about Boston is that we don't, when something is historical, we don't ever change it. And that's one of the big things, but, you know, I found Seoul fairly easy to get around once I could get a sense of which direction I needed to be going. You know.
I don't have any idea of directions still in Boston.
Yeah.
Italy's a lot easier, they name their neighborhoods.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I was gonna say, it was very accessible, and there's so many things, and by the way, this is just Seoul. Like, one of these days, I'm going to get down to one of the beach towns, you know, or one of the surrounding areas. The first time we went, a couple of students went up to the demilitarized zone, which you can do tours of that. You know, You know, and there's so much outside of just, and I think I can go back 10 times and not leave Seoul and still not be bored. You know, still have so many things that I would love to do. You know, so I mean, and like I said, obviously I'm very heavy on this one. Because I love this program, because I didn't expect to love Korea anywhere near as much as I did. I figured it'd be nice, I figured it'd be beautiful, but completely enamored with it. And you know, again, it's interesting for me to be able to talk to LIS professors in another culture, to see a university in another setting, you know, a non-Western setting, I should say. You know, to have some understanding of how things are set up, or, you know, kind of some of the history of it. You know, to learn some of those histories, to be able to do things like the film archive and the Yonsei archive, and, you know, I mean, just kind of get a sense of things that are important that you don't necessarily think about in the United States. You know, and again, you go to learn about library science in another country, regardless, you're gonna look at a lot of the stuff with new eyes.